Hi, QWERTY54321. You ask, does anyone have a good chart about what link functions to use and at what time? And not just a chart of default. It's a good question. I think if there was a really simple answer to this, then the exam would be quite easy, right? If you look at our free study guide, you'll see that there's an entire chapter on choosing the link function and the response family. So there are two components you need to take into consideration. One is what's the distribution of the target variable? If the distribution is positive, in other words, if it's strictly positive values, then you want your predictions to be positive. And so you can look at the range of the response distribution and compare that with what you need the mean to be. Like, for instance, the Gaussian distribution has a negative and a positive range. It can be any real number. And so your link function can return either a positive or negative value, right? Because it makes sense. If you have a Gaussian random variable, you can have a positive or negative mean. But if you have something like a gamma distribution that has a positive range, it has to have a positive mean, then you need to choose a link function that only has a positive range, such as the log link or the inverse squared or the square root. So that's just one example. If you look at some examples of the past exams, you can see why they explain that. But yeah, the two things you want to keep in mind are the range of the target distribution and the range of the mean. And so here's that table. I'll send you the link to the study guide. Here you'll also see a number of other useful resources like interpretation and so forth. Other things you want to take into mind when you're thinking about the link function are the interpretation. The log link function is always the easiest to interpret. But if you're thinking about classification problems, that you have a whole another set of link functions, the logit, probit, cotchit, so forth. You also wanted to think about what's the canonical link function, right? Because the canonical link function is easier to converge, so it's mathematically simpler, and it fits most of the time. Even if you don't have a link function that you can interpret, you can always use other interpretation methods, like you can look at example cases of the data. If you join the online course, you'll get access to 28 hours of videos. We have 135 practice questions. More are coming on the way. You can practice with real exams and then get feedback in real time and review your solutions and fast forward. There are a number of video solutions that cover these types of link functions. And in addition to the SOA's answer, we also go into detail about alternative models. Alternative solutions that you could use. Like, you don't always need to choose the same link function and response family that the SOA chooses. Like, sometimes it makes sense to use alternative versions, as long as you can justify your answer.